Cold nights in the early 1700s had a way of hiding terrible things. But what happened on one plantation outside Lima in the year 1716 was something the darkness itself could not swallow. The furnace was built to burn coal, not people. Yet by sunrise, 14 plantation owners had vanished, and the fire inside that furnace burned hotter than anyone had ever seen before. The strange part was not just how they died, it was who the witnesses said was responsible. A single woman, a woman named Esperanza. For decades afterward, people whispered that Night Like It was a ghost story. Some said she was a killer. Others said she was justice walking in human form. But the truth, the real truth behind what happened in that furnace, is far stranger than the legends. And tonight on Night Archive, we're stepping back into the shadows of colonial Peru to uncover the terrifying story of the woman who turned a plantation's own furnace into a graveyard. Before we go deeper into this dark chapter of history, if stories like this, forgotten events, chilling mysteries, and the hidden corners of the past pull you in, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Night Archive. It helps the channel grow, and it makes sure you never miss the next story waiting in the dark. Now, let's go back to the beginning. In the early 1700s, the outskirts of Lima were filled with vast plantations. Sugar, tobacco, and cotton fields stretched for miles under a harsh sun. Wealthy landowners lived in large estates, while the people who worked those fields lived lives built on suffering. Most of them were enslaved Africans, forced to labor from sunrise until long after the sky turned black. Among them was a woman named Esperanza. No official records describe her birth, but plantation documents mention her arriving sometime around 1708. She was believed to be in her mid-20s, strong, quiet, and unusually observant. Workers later described her as someone who listened more than she spoke. She had a calm face, but her eyes missed nothing. At first, the plantation owners barely noticed her. To them, she was simply another worker in the fields. But to the people around her, Esperanza slowly became something else. The plantations near Lima were not controlled by just one man. A group of 14 wealthy owners managed several estates together. They shared labor forces, supplies, and punishment methods. When workers disobeyed, these men would gather at the main estate house to decide what should happen. And those punishments were brutal. Workers were whipped, locked in wooden cages, or forced into the furnace rooms where coal fires burned day and night to power the plantation's sugar equipment. The furnace itself was massive, a brick chamber that glowed orange even at midnight. People feared that furnace, not because of the heat, but because sometimes workers who were dragged inside never came back out. For years, the workers lived in silence, until Esperanza began to speak. At first, It was only quiet conversations in the dark after work. Small groups gathered near the sleeping quarters where the overseers rarely listened. Esperanza would talk softly about freedom, about resistance, about how fear only survives when people accept it. No one knew where she learned to speak like that, but the more she talked, the more people listened. And slowly, something began to change inside the plantation. Tools went missing. Supply carts broke in strange ways. Work slowed down. The plantation owners blamed laziness and increased punishments. But the problems kept spreading. Entire groups of workers would stop cooperating for hours at a time. Behind it, all people later claimed, was Esperanza. But she didn't shout orders. She didn't lead marches. She simply whispered. And whispers, sometimes, are more powerful than screams. One night, in the summer of 1716, the 14 plantation owners gathered at the largest estate house. Records say they planned to discuss rising problems among the workers. Some of them believed someone was secretly organizing resistance. They didn't know how right they were. That night, the furnace was already burning. Coal fires roared inside the brick chamber as workers prepared machinery for the next morning. The heat was intense enough to make the walls sweat. But sometime after midnight, something changed. Several workers later said they saw Esperanza walking through the courtyard. Not running, not hiding, walking calmly toward the furnace building. At first, no one thought much of it. Workers moved through the property all night, performing different tasks. But what happened next would haunt those witnesses forever. Inside the estate house, the 14 plantation owners were drinking heavily while arguing about the growing unrest. According to later testimonies, a servant entered the room and told them the furnace was malfunctioning. Smoke was backing into the machinery room. If the fire spread, the sugar equipment could be destroyed. Angry and impatient, the owners went together to inspect the furnace. That decision would be the last one they ever made. When the men reached the furnace building, several workers were already there, pretending to struggle with the machinery. The heat inside the room was suffocating. Flames roared deep inside the brick chamber, and standing near the furnace door was Deeser. Some witnesses later swore she looked completely calm. One owner reportedly shouted at her to move aside. Another stepped closer to inspect the furnace opening. And then everything happened at once. The heavy iron door slammed shut behind the group. Chains dropped across the outer handles. And before anyone inside could react, workers outside forced the furnace vents open, feeding the fire with fresh coal and air. The chamber roared louder than anyone had ever heard. Panic exploded inside the building. The trapped men screamed and pounded against the metal doors, but the heat was already unbearable. Smoke filled the chamber room as flames surged deeper into the furnace tunnel. Workers standing outside heard shouting, then coughing, then something far worse. And through all of it, several people, said Esperanza, stood silently watching the furnace burn. No one knows exactly how long it lasted. Some say 20 minutes, others say nearly an hour. But when the fire finally died down and the doors were opened, the 14 plantation owners were gone. Nothing recognizable remained, just ash and twisted metal. By sunrise, the plantation had fallen into chaos. Overseers fled. Workers scattered into the countryside. Spanish authorities from Lima arrived days later to investigate what they described as the Furnace Massacre. But Esperanza was already gone. Some witnesses claimed she escaped into the mountains with other workers. Others insisted she disappeared alone into the forests beyond the plantations. The strangest part of the investigation was the silence. Dozens of workers were questioned, but no one gave clear answers about who planned the attack. Some said Esperanza was the leader. Others claimed she simply stood there while events unfolded. A few even said the workers acted on their own, and Esperanza only watched the moment happen. Without proof, authorities could never charge anyone. And over time, the official investigation quietly faded away. But the legend of Esperanza did not. In villages outside Lima, people began telling stories about the woman who burned 14 plantation owners in their own furnace. Some called her a murderer. Others called her a symbol of resistance against brutality. And the story kept growing darker. One rumor claimed the furnace fire burned so hot that night because workers packed it with every piece of coal on the estate. Another said the fire burned strangely, almost like the furnace itself had been waiting for that moment. But the most chilling rumor was about Esperanza herself. Several witnesses swore that when the furnace doors finally opened, she simply turned and walked away without saying a word. No celebration, no speech, just silence, like someone who had already finished what they came to do. And then she vanished into history. Even today, historians still debate whether Esperanza truly organized the attack, or if the workers acted together after years of suffering. Records from the period are incomplete, and colonial authorities had reasons to hide what really happened. But one fact remains certain. In 1716, 14 powerful plantation owners walked into a furnace room and never walked out again. And the only name people remembered afterward was Esperanza. Stories like this remind us that history is not always written by the people who lived through it, but by the ones who survived to tell it later. But now we want to hear from you. Do you think Esperanza planned the entire event? Or do you believe the workers themselves turned the furnace into a weapon after years of cruelty? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Stories like this often reveal details through discussion, and your thoughts might uncover something others missed. And if this story kept you watching until the end, share it with someone who loves dark history and mysterious events. You never know who else might want to step into the shadows with us. For more forgotten stories, chilling legends, and historical mysteries that refuse to stay buried, make sure you're subscribed to Night Archive, because the past is full of secrets, and some of them are still burning